how are you doing today?
Wonderful.
Could you start by introducing yourself and what we're doing here today?
My name is John Savage, and I'm a resident of Rue Jacques-Cartier, which is this street. And I've been involved in the planning of the street from a residents' stakeholder standpoint. As a Métis person, I feel that when you're doing these urban developments of an ancient waterway like this, especially on a shoreline with ancient artifacts in the ground that are 7,300 years old, that Indigenous people such as myself, including taxpayers, Indigenous taxpayers like myself, deserve to be consulted in a respectful way. And that's why I'm here today to talk about that.
Yeah, that's great. And why do you think it's important for the community to come support events like this?
It's important because some of the non-Indigenous people that came here and the Indigenous people, it's to learn about the work that we're doing to try and lead things. Indigenous people engage in grassroots leadership quite often, and it's important for us to be knowledgeable about what the issues are, what we fought for, some of the victories, and other battles to fight or to influence in the future.
And if you could go back and see yourself 10 years ago when you were here at this protest, is there anything you'd say to yourself?
Well, I had less hair than I do now, so I will say nice shaving job. But I will say, it was, get ready for another 10 years of fighting for some things that are almost no-brainers. Like you would think that it should be a no-brainer that the city would replace Indigenous households' docks used for launching canoes and kayaks with docks that the city could provide the public, like they did with the motorboaters that were given their docks. But no, the city of Gatineau did not provide us those docks. They've since provided us kind of like half a dock. It's in the water, but the gangway is too short and it's floating around out there like a raft this year. We're hoping that we can get it upgraded, but it's an ongoing battle. Be prepared, John, for wasting a lot of your money and time that could have gone towards getting a job that could pay you a pension and building up savings for your retirement. Because I've been fighting so much on this, it's actually become it's been a major distraction in my career as a self-employed consultant. It's caused a lot of stress. I had nightmares constantly for years. And the way I deal with my nightmares is I wake up at 3 a.m. and I think you have to do something to fight for your rights, because otherwise you're going to be plagued by these nightmares over and over again, like a lot of Indigenous people, because it seems to make sense that people would listen to you, but they really aren't listening to you all the time. So that's what I would say to myself to prepare myself for what it's been like since the protest was concluded in 2014.
And what was your state of mind during this process?
At first, I was very frustrated and anxious that they were digging these artifacts out of the ground without consulting anybody from the Indigenous community. I didn't really feel like I was the one to be the leader of this, so I tried to engage so-called leaders in our city and in the Indigenous community to take a lead. None of them did. So I then connected with my friend Roger Fleury, and he and I, along with Daniel Blackfeather, led the way on this protest. So it was unexpected that I would end up as one of the leaders, but we were joined by people like Audrey Redmond and Nisha Dupuis and Annie St. Germain and her husband Robert St. Germain. So it was there were other leaders too that made it grassroots. Jeff Williams as well.
Well, that's all the questions I have for you today. Thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome, and thank you for caring enough about urban planning and Indigenous issues to come here today.
On September 14th, 2024, leaders of the 2014 grassroots movement protesting for the conservation of the Rue Jacques-Cartier archeological site gathered once again. This latest gathering was intended to reflect on the events of the occupation and their outcomes. John Savage, the main organizer of the protest, went back to the story of those fateful 42 days. where the indigenous community and its allies bargained their rights to be consulted on the future of the site and demanded proper treatments of the found artifacts, amongst other things. Of all their demands, they were only able to get a park to commemorate the indigenous presence. Protesters like Audrey Redmond were disappointed and hoped for a better, more accurate representation of their culture. Redmond gave as an example the addition of teepees and a working fire pit, instead of, and I quote, a fake fire pit. She also referenced the undesirable way she and other members of the group were being treated during and after the occupation. The ceremony ended with a special call to the cities of Ottawa and Gatineau and the federal government to, and I quote, establish an urban indigenous council to protect our local indigenous culture and heritage, including protecting the river and installing canoe docks to provide safe access to the rivers, and a rededication of the park and a public exhibition of the protest and the artifacts that were found at this site.
Okay, so I just want to welcome everyone here to this very special spot under this beautiful old tree. We're here to commemorate the 10th anniversary of a coming together at this location, actually just a few hundred feet over there, where there's now a street with a sewer underneath it. And the story of this site is that 7,300 years ago, as long as 7,300 years ago, people were coming to this location, indigenous people. They may have been the ancestors of the Algonquins. They may have been the ancestors of the Iroquois. They may have been the ancestors of the Ojibwe, and they may have been the ancestors of all the indigenous people in Turtle Island. So we pay homage to them on this day. So the reason why we're coming together after 10 years is because this occupation, which began peacefully and continued as a community outreach project, by the grassroots, ended very abruptly, as I will get into it, with the arrest of some of the protesters and an abrupt conclusion. So we never really did have a final conclusion to it. So anyway, the story of this site is that the city of Gatineau proposed in 2006 to tear up the old road along here and redevelop it as a spot for people to come down to and enjoy the waterfront together. And they portrayed it as a way to help enhance their lifestyle and to make this a gathering place. Well, this place was always a gathering place, as we found when they were unearthing the site here. They found all sorts of artifacts, and the archaeologists were really excited, and I visited them quite often throughout the development of this project, and they were super excited that there were these artifacts. They found them going back 1,000 years, 2,000, 3,000, 4,000, and then eventually 7,300 years as they were going deeper and deeper. And they were quite excited about the story that was being told out of the ground here. So each of these artifacts, in relation to another one in the strata of the earth and in relationship to one another, tells a complete story, much like words do. And if you have words strung together, they can mean something, but if you just throw words on the ground and there's no relationship, that doesn't make much sense. So the importance of archaeology is it helps to tell a story with all these artifacts in relationship to one another. And what was concerning me as a resident of Rue Jacques-Cartier was that the city apparently had no consultation with the indigenous community about what they were digging up here, and that alarmed me. So I met with the mayor on June 5th of 2014, and I expressed my concern to him. He said that they did not have a duty to consult with the indigenous people, and I reminded him that there was actually a provincial manual on how to consult with indigenous communities in Quebec that he should be following, but he did not agree. So they did not consult with the indigenous community, which is the Algonquins of Kitigan-Zibi. I just want to also acknowledge that we are on unceded Algonquin territory, but it's also the territory of many peoples that have passed through here and who have lived here at different periods through the ages, including the Mohawk as well, and the Adawa that would paddle down through here. So anyway, my concern was always an ally of the Algonquins. I expressed my concern to Chief Gilbert White Duck about the fact that these artifacts were being dug up and that they weren't that the city of Gatineau had no concern about consulting with them. The chief, Gilbert White Duck, told me that he was not able to intervene at this point. I don't know what the reason was, but traditionally they're under capacity as a band and they don't have enough resources to deal with issues down in Ottawa, Gatineau. So the last time I talked to him about this was on July 1st at a paddle to Victoria, Ireland. I tried to engage Claudette Commanda as well, and she's an elder with their community. I called her 3 times and left messages, never got a response. We did hear from her through Facebook, but I won't go into that at this point. Anyway, I just found, like, in general there's no support, so I could turn to my friend Roger Fleury, who is the chief of the Algonquins of Fort Coulonge, and he came down, inspected the site with me, and we found that this archaeological site was being excavated in a hurry, and that the archaeologists felt like they were being rushed. And one thing you have to know about Canada's archaeology laws is they're really poor. We have some of the worst archaeological protection in the developed world, and the fact that that they were rushing this dig through is testament to that. They were telling me personally that they could be there for a year or two at least if they were given permission, but they were being rushed through in a matter of days to get this done. So Roger and I then invited another fellow down, Chief Daniel Blackfeather from the Oka area, and he came and inspected it. We talked to the construction crew, and they informed us the next day they were going to be burying the archaeological site, and they were going to start excavating to put a sewer pipe in there, basically to redirect the sewage through an ancient archaeological site, which is sort of a metaphor for the state of archaeological protection of indigenous archaeological sites of importance. This site, because it's 7,300 years old, is the oldest site in the National Capital Region, I've been told by various archaeologists. So if that's true, it deserves to be respected and deserves to be honored. And so what happened was when Chief Daniel Blackfeather came and we found out from the construction crews they were going to start the next day, Daniel Blackfeather said, this is an occupation. And I turned to Roger and it's like, occupation, Roger? Have you ever been in an occupation before? He said, nope, I guess we'll find out. So anyway, I said, Roger, if we're going to occupy this sand pit here, which is very hot on a day like this, it was August 8th, we're going to need some teepees, and we're going to need to bring people down to help us because we can't do it just all by ourselves. So Roger put the word out. I got some interviews with the radio station up at Kitigan-Zibi, Quay FM, and people started coming in very quickly, actually. And one of the first ones to come was Jeff Williams, Jeff here, and Audrey Redmond as well. And Audrey was, and who else? Oh, and Nisha Dupuis, yes. Sorry, Nisha. You were hiding there. Okay. So this protest was grassroots. It went viral. People were streaming in from all over the region. It was getting local media interest. It was getting provincial media interest and APTN national. And eventually we started seeing our stories popping up on foreign news channels as well, including there's one clip that remains from Taiwanese television that covers us. I think they took some footage from APTN and they rebroadcasted it. So from then on, we brought the teepees in. We got fires going. It became a community outreach project. We said that we did not want this to be an oka. We wanted this to be something where we could talk to people about the importance of indigenous culture and heritage and the right to protect our culture and heritage. And it was because this area is a community of many people, many indigenous people from all over the place. It's also a story about having urban indigenous people's rights recognized by their own cities. So not just the Algonquins who have unceded or have this unceded territory as their right, but also the people that come here and want to live here as tax-paying residents. We deserve to have urban design reflect our values as well, especially as there's a declining birth rate and high intermarriage, except for Indigenous people and immigrants. And eventually, it's conceivable the majority of Canadians living here in a few hundred years will have had some Indigenous ancestry and will most likely want their cities to reflect Indigenous values. For that reason, it's really important to design the cities today to reflect those values so that our descendants can actually enjoy cities that are based on a North American approach, a Turtle Island approach to urban development that respects our culture and heritage, including waterways, which I'll get into later. So anyway, the protest evolved, and for the next 42 days, we had people coming in. I asked an artist to paint some pictographs on the sewers to remind people in the future that when this area was dug up, because they removed all the artifacts, that at least the sewer pipes with the pictographs on them would remind the future generations that we were once here. So this camp out, what it became like, we had a fire going constantly. There's a tree that fell in my backyard, a massive tree, and so we used all that firewood to keep the sacred fire going in our other two fires in the teepees as well. And eventually the media was able to get the ear of the politicians, and we met with the city at the Sterling restaurant here approximately August 20th, around that time. So at this meeting, a number of us, the leadership of this grassroots movement, met with the city. We made the demand, and one of the demands that I put forward was this park here. And I wanted the park to have plaques in 3 different languages telling the story, so French, English, and Algonquin. So that people could come here and read it in their own language. If you look at plaques throughout Gatineau these days, they're only in French. All up and down the street, they're only in French. This is the only place in Gatineau that had it in 3 languages. And now we're starting to see this practice being replicated throughout the region. So we actually started something by doing that. And I also asked for this fire to be this fire circle to be put into the ground to represent both our protest and awareness to develop awareness of our shared heritage, but also to symbolize the people that were encamped here. So we have one here and another one down there. Very important. The other thing I wanted was art. So we have Simon Brascapay's piece over here. Very beautiful gift, or a very beautiful artwork there worth focusing on. And of course, the history of the artifacts that are on the plaques here. So you can see the history, and you can see some of the artifacts that are there. Now, that meeting went very, very well. There's a lot of goodwill, a lot of sharing of knowledge, and out of that meeting came a promise that they would develop this park and that they would work with us to protect the artifacts. After that, they had another session in which we got to see the actual artifacts and talk with the archaeologist and express our concerns and see if there's some sort of shared understanding of how these artifacts would be managed. So a couple days after that, I had a contract in Vancouver. I hadn't planned on launching a protest like this that would last 42 days. So I went to my contract in Vancouver, but kept in touch with the leaders back here, and we had the federal. One of the things I asked Roger to do was to make sure that the federal government, the National Capital Commission, to be specific, that invested in this street, to make sure that they responded to our concerns that they were not involved in this, that Indigenous people have a direct relationship with the federal government, and by them not being here at the table with us, they were abrogating their responsibilities to us. So that was responded to by the Minister Bernard Valcourt in the media. I didn't see his response, which was funny because the next week I found myself seated next to him on an airplane flight. And on the way back, I was mentioned the fact that I was part of this protest, and I noticed he got very nervous all of a sudden and then didn't talk to me the rest of the flight. So I later found out the reason why he was kind of nervous around me based on the fact that it seemed a little bit too weird that he was actually talking to one of the guys involved in that protest that demanded that he respond on behalf of the federal government. So anyway, the protest continued, and then on September 18th, or I must mention though too that the other leaders, Roger Fleury and Audrey Redmond, wanted a higher level of responsibility by the city to involve them in the discussion about how the artifacts would be treated and the site itself. So I'll let Audrey speak to that. As far as I was concerned, I was pretty happy with the fact that we had the park, that we had guarantees that the artifacts would be protected and that we would be recognized. And I was also made mention that we had concerns over the waterway for paddlers and Indigenous use of the green spaces and sacred spaces around this area. So I'll pass it over to Audrey now to let you know how it was from her perspective. Thank you.
Good day, good day. September 14th. I remember this day very well, 10 years ago. And this is the day we got arrested. John is happy with what is here to commemorate the day, to commemorate anything Indigenous. Well, I'm not happy with it. I don't see any TP here, and I see a fake fire here. All of us, almost all of us were here at this event 10 years ago. There was 5 of us who were arrested, 5 of us that went through 4.5 years of court. And there are people that were there that are not here today. Roger Fleury passed away 2.5 years ago, and through the whole process of going through the courts, he lost 2 of his houses. He had a heart attack, and then he died. But Roger was one of those men who pushed the boundaries. And he was the one who had the teepees brought here. And he was the one who encouraged us all that time to stand for who we are. And this is who we are as Indigenous people. We have no symbols left in this country to show who we are except a fake fire here in Ottawa. Right here is Roger's drum. In that fake fire pit, there's a stone. That stone went through the fire for 43 days and 43 nights through rain, tornadoes, and I was a firekeeper. So I knew that fire, and that fire never went out. And when we were arrested, they put a fence around that fire, and no one would touch it. So they know that who we are as Indigenous people count for something. They just don't know what. That's because on this land, this is what we see now. We see a nice bike path, and that's what they wanted on their $43 million waterfront project. And what people didn't know in this area was that the people in this neighborhood had been fighting it for 10 years. 10 years. And the city here would not listen to them. The restaurant down the street over here, well, there was a house there that had been a heritage property. that they wanted to keep. Well, the city had it torn down and had a parking lot put there for the restaurant. So this is what the cities do when it comes to culture and when it comes to First Nations culture. What I saw here on this site when I was here for 43 days and 43 nights, not only did I see you here, but what I saw was many First Nations people coming from out east, on the East Coast. We had Mi'kmaq people come here. We had a man come from Manitoba who had been fasting and walking all the way from his territory because they were putting people on his reserve who were they didn't belong there. But they were taking membership and then taking their land. And this is what has happened here. And this man who came all that way came and he broke his fast right here with us. And that day that we were arrested, we all were singing together, and it was a happy day. But it was a sad day. Because again, what we stand for was taken down. The teepees were taken down. We were arrested. And then there's no sign of indigenous anything except for a fake fire pit. So to me, not only Ottawa, but Canada has denied who we are by denying us the right to even have our own artifacts, to even have a place that was a rite of passage. The archaeologist Chevrier had the nerve to say, this place has no spiritual significance. And they put it in the paper. And because he said it, he had authority. But we had no authority whatsoever, even though everything here is spiritual significance to us. The water, the land, the freedom to live on this land, the freedom to share with other people who come here. We've done that. We've done our part. And what we see here is a continuous aggression against Indigenous people, starting with places like artifacts, starting with Ottawa. So thankfully, something did come out of it. The Algonquins got recognition that this is their land, this is their artifacts. And I'm happy for them. But the people who fought for this got no recognition at all. Roger Fleury was condemned for it. I was told that I don't belong here, that I should just leave. We saw Hélène, who lives up the road. He had a house, 13 generations. He died. He lost his house. We saw John, the Métis, who came every day to visit us and bring food to us. And he passed away, but he wanted to be there. It was important to him. And that's how important it is to many Métis people who live here, because they have Indigenous roots. And those Métis people, many of them wouldn't even say it because they were so ashamed. Because if they had admitted that they had any Indigenous roots, they couldn't own land, they couldn't get a job, they couldn't send their kids to school. So they lived like Indigenous people, and they know that life. So we want Canada to recognize the fact that, number one, this is our land. Number two, we've got artifacts all over this land that recognizes our ancestors, because that's what they are to us. When I came here, I had no idea what the significance of artifacts were. But when I sat here for those 43 days, and I listened to the people, and I sat on this land, I learned that there is spiritual significance here. This is sacred land. It's how you treat it. If you have any sacred inside of you, you will treat this land as sacred. And that's what it comes down to. We have our sacred fires. They're taken from us. We have nothing in Ottawa. I'm an Indian residential school survivor and a 60 scooper. I lost everything, lost my land, lost my people, everything. And we can't even have a fire where we can gather around and pray in Ottawa. I got arrested for that in 2016 on Victoria Island, where we can't even go there anymore. There's a fence around it. So the spiritual significance that we experience in this city and across this nation is the spiritual significance of the Canadian people and what they do to it and how they try to destroy that. And the only way Canadian people are going to come around to figure it out and what they're going to do with their life is to come to that spiritual significance and come to these sacred fires with us. Come. Stand around where you're supposed to be, because that's what the treaties say. We're supposed to be together, standing around and talking and living together. Side by side, yes, not interfering. And of course, that wasn't true, because all of who we are has been interfered with. So I know I can go on and on about this thing because it's very, very important. And all of us here are important because in 2014, we were the artifacts. We left the mark on this place. Every one of us that came here was an artifact. And what we did was an artifact. What we are doing here today is an artifact. And we are leaving that print of who we are as Indigenous people and what we want in this land and how we want people to live and how they came here to live in peace and prosperity. And that wasn't about economy. It was about people. And until we come together like this again, we will not have peace in this country because everybody has to come together equally. And it's the only way that we have left. And it is to honor our ancestors who went before us, the ones who died here, the ones who gave their lives for this land before we were here. And some of us won't be here for very long. And whatever we leave behind, we want people to remember. I want people to remember what I just said, because I want this land to change. And I think what we'll do today, what we brought here, the artifacts, this here is Roger's drum. That there is one of the rocks that was in the fire. Only half of it is there because that's my half. It's split in half once the fire was done. And Roger took half and I took the other. And we have some ashes that were in that fire. And I've carried those ashes with me. And I think that's what we have to do to go from here. We carry it. We carry what we know within our hearts. And if it means anything to us, then we have to live it. It's not just words. I don't just speak these words. I live it. I get up in the morning and I give thanks to the Creator for the sunshine. That's how I start my day. You know, sunrise ceremony. And we got to get back there. And we can't rush that. And we can't forget it. Because it's our life-saving, what we do, how we live. It's going to save us. So we're going to end this little, what I've just said, with a song. And we know the Strong Women's song, or some of us do. She's going to, this lady, what's her name? Mac. She's going to lead us in the Strong Women's song. And I think, we're very, very thankful for the men and what they do. And they need our help. And us women, that's what we're here to do. We have to help our communities because they're all suffering. So when we sing the song, let's just remember them and remember the generation to come because it's going to be tough on them. Our sacred ways have to come back. hey ya, way high, oh, way, hey ya, way, hey ya, hey ya, way, hey ya, way, hey ya, hey oh, way, hey ya, way high, oh, way, hey ya, oh, way, hey ya, way, hey ya, way high, oh. Way, hey ya, way, hey ya, hey oh. Way, hey ya, way, hey ya, hey oh. Way, hey ya, way high, oh. Way, hey ya, oh, way, hey ya, way, hey ya, way high, oh. Way, hey ya, way, hey ya, hey oh. Way, hey ya, way high, oh. Way, hey ya, way, hey ya, way, hey ya, way high, oh. Well, it's as best as we could, but
Well,
an honor.
thank you very much for that beautiful song. So I just wanted to acknowledge Jeff Williams. He was very instrumental in getting this protest going. Huh? Oh, I asked Alex. Alex was 3 years old. He's a protest child. So but he says he doesn't have anything to say at this point. I just want to say, okay, so as the protest wound up, it came to a sudden conclusion with the arrest of the final protesters at the occupation, and then everything ended. I was in Vancouver and I came back in 2016, and while in Vancouver, I was fighting against the city of Gatineau based on indigenous rights to try and get safe access to the water, and I had used the Quebec government's own guidelines on how to consult with indigenous peoples as my guide, and the city's lawyers did not want to even meet with us. And my lawyers said, it's cost you $18,000 so far to argue for an indigenous right to access the river on behalf of the community. You are going to win this, but it's going to probably go to the Supreme Court the way the lawyers of the city actually are operating, and we would propose a very intelligent, well thought out legal argument, and they would counter with something pretty inane. So that was their game, was just to frustrate us and to wear me down in finances. So I came back, and I noticed that the river wasn't being designed the way it was supposed to. The city took away the 2 docks from that were used for canoes and kayaks, and they were coincidentally owned by the only 2 families, or they were owned by 2 indigenous families, these docks. So the only docks that were removed and not replaced were the indigenous docks. All the non-indigenous people had their motorboats docks replaced with a special marina for motorboats. Later, I had to get the ombudsman to verify that there was no safe access to the river along here, and that the city was lying to us when they said that they actually gave us safe access, which was absolutely not true. It was just gaslighting us. So the other thing I noticed was when they built this park, they had a ceremony all of a sudden one day, and they had all these people from Kitigan-Zibi down doing dancing and ceremonies with the city people we had negotiated for this park to be created. So can you imagine? Here I am, part of the group that actually proposed or made this as one of our demands. For a park that would have an installation like an art piece and this explanation of the artifacts here in 3 languages and the fire circles, and they didn't even invite any of us to this, including Annie Saint Germain, who was the representative from Kitigan-Zibi's community there for us, and she was the one that took a lot of the leadership at that meeting, and it was really great to have her support and that of her husband, Robert Saint Germain. So they didn't invite us. They had a big party here. None of us were invited. It was clear at the end that we had driven the city into the arms of Kitigan Zibi. And I talked to Chief Gilbert White Duck afterwards, and he said that was the first time he'd ever been consulted on anything by the city of Gatineau. And later, and later, yeah, so that was, yeah, the dogs are outraged. There you go. Yeah, I don't blame you. So, hey, Monique. Monique was with us too. So she's been a supporter. Monique, your dock was taken away by the city too, right? Your dock. Do you want to say anything about that? Your dock. Yeah, okay. I'll give you a chance to talk if you like. So anyway, so Monique Briand and her husband Pierre, they had a dock and they used it for launching kayaks. And Pierre was non-status Algonquin. And so it was part of our health. My health, actually, I gained 50 pounds right after that dock was taken away. 50 pounds. So I went from being a very fit individual to being, quite overweight. And that led to all sorts of other issues. So anyway, it took 10 years to fight that battle. And eventually the city, after challenging the mayor and our councillor in council 6 months in a row, finally the city gave up. And through our new councillor, Mike Duggan, who I'm very proud to say has become a very good advocate for the water and for non-motorized docks for safe access, he was able to put us in contact with the new city administration that looked more kindly upon our needs as a community and as Indigenous people. So I'm looking to build on that effort by him and the current city administration, and to do other positive things for the community, to build from the spirit of this protest. And I'll talk about that a bit later. One of the calls to action, though, that I will preface, that I'll speak about later, is the call to improve the waterway. We need more access, safe access with non-motorized boat docks for canoes and kayaks and rowing shells. We need a speed limit on the river. That's called a vessel operation restriction regulation that Transport Canada can implement very easily within a 2-year window if they're asked to by the cities. All it takes is for the city of Gatineau and the city of Ottawa to send the letter to the Transport Canada, and they will actually start the process to get a speed limit here. We're the only major city in Canada that doesn't have a speed limit and a controlled waterway. Why is that? You know, you go to places like San Diego and they have that there, and it's working out quite well, and it's bringing people to the waterfront for fitness. Right here, what we have is a bunch of motor boaters zipping up and down. A lot of them are stressed out themselves because they're trying not to hit one another, and then the few brave paddlers that go out there and rowers are getting swamped by these. Some of them are psychopaths. They're trying to flip us, going circles around us and laughing as they're doing that with their shirts off. So anyway, I'll pass it over to Al Harrington here, and he can tell you a little bit about his adventures this summer paddling and what it was like.
Anin, Sego, hello, and bonjour. My name is Alan Harrington, and I want to say thank you to the individuals that organized this today. I was contacted early this morning to see if I can make it here. I'm resigning in Gunasadage, and my friend there, I've never met him before, just been talking over on the internet. Misha introduced us, but this summer I'm a 60-70 scooper. I'm also an activist. I stand up when it's needed. The last little, I guess, since the pandemic, I've been very quiet. But, you know, back in Gunasadage, there's a lot of issues that we are still dealing with, even from the Oka crisis right up to now, and it's still going on. I didn't know about this. This was actually going on, so I did some research and some learning on my way up. And what Audrey was saying that really got me burning was, you know, when it comes to these educated individuals, where their word is taken over before ours. We are the land stewardship of the people, of the land. And when I seen and read the part where this area was not a significant cultural experience, I disagree with that. Growing up, trying to find my identity, where I belong. I kind of grew up in both worlds. I try to learn and try to understand about the two-row wampum back in the day between Canada and the Anishinaabe people, Mohawk. When we signed that agreement to educate one another, and we were supposed to go side by side. Never, and coming back and finding out where I belong, like my home community, I'm Ojibwe, is northwestern Ontario. And but now I reside in Gunnesadage with my children. So, coming back, culture is one important thing for our people and for myself, for my kids. Understanding, these waterways, the old paths, is very important to us, and it should be important to everybody else. The last 500 years to where we are today is really disgusting. And it really hurts too, because, coming up from Gunnesadage to Ottawa, like I was going to do a canoe trip this summer from here to my home territory, which would have been to about 2,600 kilometers. Unfortunately, I had to stop here in Ottawa, actually right across here. I was telling my friend Danielle that gave me a ride up here today, is that this is coincidence that where I stopped on the canoe trip is straight across in that bay there. And I'm going to continue it next year, because I didn't realize the individual that was helping me out said that I needed a portage from there, and where I needed to go is almost 13 kilometers. Oh, it's about a 3.5-hour portage one way. Plus my canoe was breaking, and I had to just rethink about it. For myself, I'm an individual that I try to educate and teach my children of how important to stay and to learn and to understand about our land, our languages, where we would belong. It's very important. Connection is very important, especially with the land. But, in the last 500 years to where we are, I just, if we don't start really educating even one another and also the Canadians, that we do need each and one of us to be walking together and try to correct what is being done. Coming up the river was very hard for myself to do. There was no camping. These $1 million homes all the way coming up the river, probably all the way back to my territory. Camping was very hard to find. A lot of private property, even from the government, there's private property signs too, or you can't camp there. And I've been reaching out to people that know the river and that has done the river too. And they told me where to camp and stuff. And some of the places were impossible to get to. All my camping spots coming all the way up to Ottawa for took me 11 days to get here. All my camping areas that I stayed with was swampy and not very good, because all the lands are all taken, right up to the river. I even coming into Ottawa here too, it was very hard. You can't leave your stuff unattended. We really need to do a lot more, and Canada really needs to do a lot more on our waters and our land, as in protection. And Canada really needs to start listening to our own people, our own elders. It's unfortunate, my grandparents and my parents are not around anymore, but they were great teachers. And, my family name's Paness. And, I never got to experience and learn from them because I was growing up in that system. But coming back and learning, learning the even the language. I speak this foreign language, English, and that's the only one I can speak. I lived in Quebec. I try to understand the language, but it's not in my dialect to speak it, and I find it very hard. So I try to educate even Canadians about when I speak, and it's been a while that I haven't speak about about this foreign language that I speak, because we don't see that today as a foreign language. We see this as a first language, which is again, that is totally wrong. Our First Nation languages are the first languages. But I want to stay on top with this. I am so happy that individuals, not even from the territory, but I think we all understand that as Indigenous people, we were nomads, and wherever we went, we respected and we try to look after the land as best as possible and leave it the way we left it. And that's something that I learned growing up, even going into these camps growing up. But we really need to start really waking up and really need to start protecting our water and what is left out there, because it's really, really heartbreaking coming up that river. The amount of garbage, the amount of tires, the amount of garbage that are stashed on islands from locals, oil. There is oils on islands. I was walking through just really gross stuff. And Canada is not out there patrolling. These boaters, like what he was talking about, they didn't give it. They were going to run me over on a few times. They came close, And I, hate to say this, but being dark skinned or any kind of minority out there, there's on my way up, I experienced racism out there on the waters, and that's not good. Like a lot of these big boats out here, they don't give a shit about canoers, or part of my language, but canoers, kayakers, or anybody that wants to use it. They if you see these boats out here now, they travel as fast as they want. It's the other thing too is Canada needs to, all these ferries coming up, because I had to go through a couple ferries, through a couple dams coming up, and they were going to charge me money to get through the other side, and I fought and I argued, and I didn't have to pay, and I told them that Canadians shouldn't have to pay either, because this is a right, and we need to start speaking up and start really going to our local municipal officials and start telling them, you need to start listening, and you need to start really listening to our people, because we have been here ever since of time, and when it comes to this educational institutions, I'm not on board for it. We're starting to learn a lot of truth behind the education system now. But anyways, I will always stand up with our people and anybody that wants to stand up and do the right thing on our lands and waters, because, 500 years, look where we are and look where we're headed to, look how fast the climate, and this is just the whole world, of how fast the population is getting out of control. And we really need to protect our waters, because we are the only, almost the only ones in the world with the most fresh water. And once that is destroyed, we're going to be destroyed as the human race. Gwitch.
Thanks, Al. Yeah, I really like what you said about your challenges paddling up the river, like a lack of camping spots, and the boat traffic is just out of control. It would be a nice vision one day that we could paddle across Canada and have campsites dedicated for people doing that kind of trip that you want to do thousands of kilometers back to your home community. So anyway, one of the things I wanted to just conclude with was a list of calls to action that we're requesting the City of Gatineau, the City of Ottawa, and the National Capital Commission combined. Because we saw, for example, they developed this project and they left out, we were an afterthought, the Indigenous community, and there was no way to verify that all the consultations, the years of consultations that they did with us, there was no way to confirm that they actually followed through on any of our concerns. For example, in front of my place, I asked them not to remove my dock, and please don't put any kind of barriers like a guardrail in front of my place to block me from the river. And they did exactly that. And so one wonders, like even for a white Indigenous person like me, how racist is the system if they can't even follow their own consultation rules and give all the non-Indigenous people their motorboat docks that they asked for. So anyway, these are in the spirit of our 2014 protest, these calls to action on behalf of the urban Indigenous community, which are all Indigenous people from the region, whether or not you have a land right here, such as the Algonquins. What we want is an archival exhibit at the Hotel de Ville, the City Hall, that showcases this protest and its historical importance, the positive outcomes and the future aspirations for improvement in our relationship with the city. And this would showcase the ancient presence on Rue Jacques-Cartier, including the artifacts that were extracted, the images from the protest, and the documents and statements from protesters and other participants that illustrate the positive outcomes and aspirations for future collaboration with the city. Number two, we would like to establish, have the city of Gatineau and Ottawa, I believe Ottawa may already have one, but if they don't, to establish an Indigenous Advisory Council that reports to Council and includes Indigenous people from Gatineau, from each ward of the community, and a representative from Kitigan, Zibi, and Pikwakanagan, because this is their unceded territory and we're allies of theirs. We call upon the city to implement an ongoing Indigenous consultation on all matters of culture, heritage, and urban planning that relate to Indigenous people, and this especially includes the waterfront, which is our ancient highway that was a network here for thousands of kilometers. Based on the artifacts found here, we know they were extracting copper from the north of Lake Superior, quartzite from northern Quebec, and other materials from Ohio and Pennsylvania. We also want the protection of Indigenous spaces in our city that includes waterways, islands, and historical sites. This would include creating a speed limit on the Ottawa and Gatineau rivers and non-motorized boat docks with plaques at them to commemorate our use of the river as a major canoe route in times past and for the future. I would also like to add that we want our stories to be told at these sites by Indigenous people, not by non-Indigenous people, not by non-Indigenous organizations, like what was done with the Kitchissippi ancienttrails.com that Peter Stockdale got the Green Space Alliance to get funding from the federal government for, using my storytelling, my images, and my videos. So we don't want that to happen again, and we want us to be involved in the storytelling. Number 4, we want support for Indigenous recreation in our community that reconnects Indigenous people with their shared heritage. Canoeing programs, for example, and walking along the ancient portages and trails of this area. I think that would be a very positive thing to get people from the friendship centers down into canoes and paddle and feel comfortable on the river once again. And for groups like the Ottawa Paddlers to feel like this is a place where they can refer people from their Facebook site to come paddling down here as a positive experience in our nation's capital where, people have lived for thousands of years. Why shouldn't we be enjoying this birthright instead of just turning it into mayhem and craziness out there? Number 5, we want reconciliation with the 2014 protesters between the city and them. And this includes a rededication of this park, Place Abinan, and it would include a ceremony and a plaque that documents our contribution to the creation of this park. We were the ones that proposed it. We were the ones that fought for it. We're the ones that should also be recognized for posterity for having pushed this forward. And under the former mayor, Pinot Jobin, we were excluded from the final design in the opening ceremony, even though we were the ones that made this demand. So we need to rededicate this park to set council back as an ally rather than as an adversary. And we hope through the intervention of Mike Duggan and other allies on council that they will do this. The sixth point is that we want a city-sponsored urban indigenous powwow and conference in this area that brings together local and international indigenous people to share knowledge on how to protect urban indigenous culture and heritage concerning urban planning, recreation, and heritage programs. This would potentially become an annual event that would boost tourism, share knowledge, and showcase Gatineau as the leading city internationally on such concerns. And I think if we can take these steps, these calls to action over the next few years, we will see very positive improvements in our community and true reconciliation. And reconciliation isn't something you just pull off the shelf. It's something you have to work for. It's an ongoing process. This protest proved that we had many positive outcomes, and we have a lot of work that remains to be done. And I'm hoping that at some point we can fill the waterways up with paddlers again, and we can come to this park here and we can have ceremonies like we did during our protest days over those 42 days that we were here. So with that being said, I will take any questions people may have. Otherwise, we will conclude the event. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay. Marcy Miigwech. Yes. Oh, where are the artifacts today? Nisha asks. Everybody asks that. Where are the artifacts today? We don't know, and that's why that's our first call to action, is that we want an exhibit of those artifacts in the City Hall, and one that we can participate in the display of those artifacts and help tell the story. Any other questions? Thank you to all the paddlers that showed up here. I want to also suggest that if anyone's interested in going in my big canoe sometime tonight for a sunset paddle, you're very welcome. I believe we can fit 13 people in the canoe. So that's a fantastic way to end this event, I think. Okay, thank you very much.
To conclude, there is hope for a better communication between the cities and the indigenous people of the region. But there is still a lot of work to do for reconciliation. To follow more news in the Eastern Ontario region, please follow our YouTube channel at TVC22 and our social medias at HubTVC22. I am Benjamin Richard for TVC22.